20 years of experience in the private sector, Beatriz has been actively transforming the mentality of employees in times of change and challenges through organizational cultural programs, fostering personal commitment, systemic thinking and awareness, as well as promoting self-management, resilience, and creativity in cross-functional teams. Welcome, Beatriz. It's so good to have you with us here. I'm now going to hand it over to you so you can start your masterclass.
Yuri and everyone at the MasterClass Initiative and Africunia TV and all of you, please be welcome. I'm so excited, again, just to be marveled at what Yuri was mentioning. This is so futuristic that we were just really able to connect from everywhere. I greet you from the sunny Cancun, the Caribbean, the Mexican Caribbean. It's morning over here, and some of you might also be in this time, but it's more afternoon for you. So again, it's just the excitement that you can come together as to share on a topic that I really hold dear to my heart. And while Yuri was mentioning, you know, about the things that we normally do, I believe leadership and ethics, and wherever we are in a work company, in our families, in our countries, is a very personal issue. It's not about what you do, but also about how you behave. And so we're going to cover today those two items. Okay, I will speak to you about what a code of conduct in a company that I work with looks like, and also the steps that you need to take. But also we'll share two personal stories that kind of shaped my professional life. One in the early beginnings, such as many of you might be. I was around 4 years into a company, again, just very eager and a very nice team of people. And then another one more recently again, here in Central America, when I was also teaming up with human resources teams and accounting and all of the rest. So wherever you might be, I'm really happy to hear questions, so just type them in. Yuri, thank you for being at my right hand today, and Madeline and everyone. So let's kick off. Okay. There we are. Well, and I was sharing today, I will cover what ethics is, very simple, in a simple way. And my stories, as I mentioned, and I would really welcome in the last piece that I will be more asking questions rather than telling you what to do, because like I mentioned, it's for you to make sense into your own context. And in the last few slides, I will ask you some definite actions that you can take from what we've covered today. So this is about you, and not just about what I can share, which I'm really, really glad. And research and resources, that I was very also glad to see that it comes together as what are some global, some 7 rules of behavior that are considered to be globally acceptable. You know, in any culture around the world, these are seen as the key behaviors that make up a good society. And I was just very not surprised, but gladly surprised in that way. Okay, so in a very easy way to define ethics, it is really about doing the right thing when nobody's watching you. It's a very colloquial definition, and it works for me because this is, like I mentioned, it's a very internal behavior that you kind of, in day-to-day situations or in work-life situations, something that you have to internalize and have a reflection on what it looks like for you before you can take on others or talk about it or go into the formal way. Then, so it comes again to where your context is, like you can be in the family, you know, even when you can imagine as a child taking a cookie jar, you know, from on your break time, a cookie from the cookie jar when you weren't supposed to do that. So it's all those conversations that we have on an early age that might come up, okay? And values are those Also the principles that kind of everyone agrees on. So they're very tied together, and it's a judgment of what you come to value in life. And the reason I distinguish this is that values are usually named at a company or a family that we value, respect, determination, leadership. But values go a little bit beyond that in terms that they are usually defined in a more detailed way. So we can say that, yes, we value team effort, but then sometimes we prize individual achievement. So then they seem to be at cross. So in a nutshell, so ethics is just really allowing you to go by the rules, but also not when you are called upon somebody, when you don't have an authority. It's just really behaving consistently in a way. And values are what brings us together as also as a society. And values are considered sometimes to be kind of changing as you go on. For example, if you're, I remember my brother-in-law, for example, when his child was born, he just really kind of shifted into what was important in life. So it's not to say that if your values change over a period of time, it's bad. It's just that you're kind of growing and evolving, and it totally makes sense. As long as what we will talk about, as long as you really go by the norms and rules of your context. Okay. And this is also a very relevant case today, a relevant topic, I would say, because how many of you have heard leaders in all areas of not just work life, but worldwide? And now we have safety, health crisis, for example, that you have seen or heard of that have really acted ethically in the last 6 months. So just think about for a minute. And it might be from a headline, it might be from, again, directly in the company that you were working with, or as if you're an entrepreneur on your own, like myself, then another leader might be people that you work with, your supplier or your customers. So again, leadership also to me is just very, doesn't go with a rank or with a title. It just really goes into that anyone that is involved in bringing change, in bringing decisions for your life, and becoming involved in your community. So if you think about for a moment in one person, and one person that comes to mind is people, for example, at Airbnb that really handle some dismissals of their teams in a very open and transparent way. But that is just my example. You can come up with another. And think about what were the implications for you. And implications, I mean, how did they affect you? It could be, like I mentioned, in a touchy subject, and how your work was going around, like the safety measures that we were taking all over the world. And again, how the morale, how your mood was affected. Mm-hmm. So just think about it for a moment, because that's where really, when you notice behaviors in people that you admire or people that you don't admire, that's a really way to start into internalizing your values and how you want to behave from a moment forward. Okay. Now I've worked almost 20 years in a company in the technology sector. We were doing bringing electricity to many areas around the world, and automation. So it was so because we had, not just because of electricity, but also because the values that we held, it was just very important to follow standards for, because in certain areas, the shock of electricity, you really have to be trained in a certain way. You have to follow procedures. So safety was a very high value in the company that I was. So we had what I mentioned, this code of conduct that was rolled out in all of the countries. And it's a challenge to adjust, not just to the country where you are, but when you make operations globally. Mm-hmm. And what I mentioned, a code of conduct, which is usually a formal document. It doesn't have to be very long, but it has to be very specific into what we value. How to make our customers successful, how do we make our suppliers And like I mentioned before, it just really brings you a common language. And another example that comes to mind, which is interesting because it's not that these days climate change is a value. I think it has always been, companies just really want to make successful in a community they want to operate. But it wasn't given the high regard that is given today. So in my opinion, it has kind of changed its priorities. And so we spoke about, healthy, and in the company that I mentioned, just ABB, you can look it up. We were always careful how we were impacting our communities, and we were doing, housing our CO2 footprint, etc. Way before it was just mandatory. So it's so again, what I mentioned below is that it's really inspirational. It just really gives you something that makes you want to work for a central group of people. So it could be this code of conduct that it just really has to be available to everyone and communicated. And now the shared values, and this is, I would say, the tricky part. Because you have the code of conduct, which is kind of the constitution, like in a country, like what we inspired to believe, and it was what it was founded for. It doesn't usually have the people that interact there. But the shared values is just exactly what I was telling you about. It's how you behave and how you do it on a daily practice. And it's usually those when we're not behaving into that area, that is where the code of conduct breaches come. It's when you're not complying, such as like I mentioned, like a healthy standard. For example, also in the company that I work with, for the salespeople, there was a lot of training in driving safely, because the sales colleagues need to transport and commute, etc. So that was so they were not. It didn't matter that you have to be at a certain, like right now, like in a workplace or in your home office, but when you were commuting towards work or towards seeing a customer, it was also considered a work practice. And so we had to take care of people just really going above and beyond, to not to text when we were driving, such a simple item, or to look out and when you were crossing, and also adhering to those rules, and using a seatbelt and helmets, and being mindful of others if it was going into motorcycles, which are also very common in our daily lives. So again, and how we behaved, and those, again, because of common, I would say, pressures or shortcuts, or sometimes when you're in a rush, you just really want to get somewhere, etc. And you kind of put the values on the side. So we had a few incidents on traffic accidents, and we really had to learn from that. And it was not just when an accident might happen, but how we recover from that and how we reinforced that it really builds trust in the teams. And so most of the companies that, I would say a lot of them, or probably I would challenge you to find one that doesn't have like a formal code of conduct or shared values, and its reputation does not hold for long. Okay, so it's again the people that work in a company that helps build trust and that you put yourself in. And so that is really what, if you're thinking about setting up a code of conduct for the place that you work with, or you want to raise or working with somebody that is that has this on their mind, do it. And again, it doesn't have to be very sophisticated. It's just really more about the daily work that we want to see around. Okay. So let me give you another example, which was I think this was a time when I wasn't working in human resources. I was part of a quality team, which was a lot of processes involved in how we have quality assurance and doing the certifications for customers and suppliers. So it was a lot in different settings. And I had a team of colleagues that we kind of had joined in ABB around the same time, and we were, and it was mostly of us. It was our first job, so it was kind of a small gang that we were that we had, and we had worked in different, you know. I managed the customer processes, and my colleague handled IT, and we had another colleague that was more into the procurement and project management activities. But we were all in a project at one time or another, and we had some definite tools that we implemented for the teams. So they were in the local servers, and we had information there that people logged in, the customer information, and we tracked everything. And one of them was the one that was working in IT. He resigned. He was just moving on into another career, which was made us happy. But one afternoon that was going through, like 3 days before he had given his notice, I noticed that he, you know, because of the logs, he had taken some company information, some customer information, and he had been involved in the development, and again, I didn't report to him. We were like at the same level, but I was just very shocked and sad, and again, not really knowing how to manage. And I ended up going to him and telling him, well, you know, I saw that you have this information, and it's, you know, in those times, okay, we did use a USB. Maybe you don't use it these days, but it's we didn't have a cloud system. That's what I mean. And he was a bit. What kind of shocked me in a way was that he just really didn't see it as a bad thing that he had done, because he had developed it in the same way, and because he had involved in the development and the supporting people using it, etc., and doing the manual. So he didn't see it as anything that was wrong. And so that's why I took like the questions in the beginning. So I thought, well, what are the implications? Because I didn't have, like I mentioned, I was doing my role. It wasn't, but I knew it was just not the right thing to do. You know, even if we had or not a code of conduct, it was just something that made me really uncomfortable. And I ended up going to who would later become my boss. I think that's why he hired me, to human resources, perhaps. And I told him, well, this is what I noticed, and I don't know what to do. And so he was, again, respectfully managed the situation with the involvement of legal, of what he had done, and having the records. And again, it was just not only that, it just kind of, because like I mentioned, I really had lunches with him. We were just really, really good pals. But it really saddened me. So those was kind of the implications for me. And for him, for example, if you think about it, he was just, you know, he was in the right path, I would say, because he was just really giving a formal notice to move on. But this kind of shatter made me wonder if he really got a recommendation to work somewhere else. And again, so just kind of this small item kind of tainted the environment. Even though we handled it, it was just, these things just don't go away. And sometimes the option is for you to stay silent. I could have done nothing, which was another item. So, and again, so you might have heard or seen a situation like this with the people that you work with. It doesn't have to be with your team members, but maybe with a supplier that you trust, or maybe that someone that you're working with. And it's not to say that it's not a correct item. And again, to me, the openness to manage it like thoughtfully was what brought me, I would say, closure in a way. Because I knew I wasn't, I was sad at the moment for losing my friend. We didn't speak later on. But it's again, what we do, and I was happy to work in that company for years to come because of how we managed it. Again, it's not black or white, but it's just really doing it in a very thoughtful way. And one thing is that I want to stand out. It's also you want to ask for help. So I couldn't handle it on my own. I tried. I don't know if that was the best thing at the time. But I know going and opening up and asking for someone else that, what is this about? This is what I noticed. That's when you, that's the right thing to do. Okay, always be mindful of yourself to keep yourself safe, and then go about the case. So this is what kind of steered me in the way into human resources and being involved in these sorts of programs. And because of this, I want to tell you right before how you build a code of conduct, because we will look into that. It's how you roll it out, how you communicate, because that is just as important of besides of what's in the content. And so these are 4 items, which is establish the code of conduct, communicate and launch. And these items you can never over communicate. And the third step is like, how does it become alive? As you have a dialogue with employees, which I also will talk about in a minute. And what I mentioned, the support structure, it doesn't have to be like a person. It has to be like it has to be also formalized, not just human resources or legal, etc. Just really has to be very named, and has to have kind of autonomy to work around in the team, because like I mentioned, not every case is the same. And then like I mentioned, my case, for example, was very internal, but we will cover another story where it was more into interacting with authorities, which meant the social security authorities at a company. So sometimes it's external, someone that we will speak to, a visitor that is coming to audit, or like I mentioned in the climate change, in the sustainability area, those are also authorities in these days, so they're stakeholders. So the support structure, again, it's not, what I want to give is that it doesn't have to be heavy, but it has to be formal, and they have to have autonomy. So it doesn't have to be a whole body of people, because then that also sometimes interrupts the flow. But it has to be there, and everybody needs to know how to reach it, how to reach them. Now, I'm gonna go back in the communicate and launch. This is very important, and I'm very glad that, again, I refer back to my days, because I really became, again, after 20 years when I joined, or even 15 years ago, we didn't have Instagram. So, but when I moved along into the tourist sector, it was really great to see the leadership team just really involved in all the messages of the company. So if you're going to communicate, now the way it's done, in a way, it just really have the stories come to life, like we value, and doing videos of what it is of the life at the company that you work with, or the life, if you're setting up your own, it's like the life you want to bring into the area. So it's just really having people talk about the values and the code of conduct and being excited. So, but the leadership team has to just really acknowledge. And again, leadership team, I mean the directives, like just really the team, the highest ranking members of any organization. So they just really have to endorse. It's not a human resources thing, or the people in health and safety, or the lawyer. It's just really has to be the founders and the ones that take responsibility. They really have to sign in and give a message. It's also not from the communications area. And formalized acknowledgement is what I mentioned. It's just sometimes we have, like when you go when you sign up today, to a newsletter, to a sports channel. I mentioned sports because the NFL is kicking off, so it's kind of the sports that I follow. So you sometimes have to acknowledge, you're giving your email or your number, and then you sometimes have to acknowledge and formalize. So those small ticks of yes, I heard and read and I accept these are just really important to have on everyone. because of what I mentioned, it's and usually comes in your first day on job or alongside. Every year you make a campaign, etc. And I'm going to go back to my ABB days in terms of what does it involve the dialogue with employees. Once you have them named out, that everybody is aware, it's really important that we provide training and we provide feedback to what does it look like. And it was one of the examples that I gave you in the beginning. You might say, yes, team respect, for example, is a value that we have here. But that might look different for a team leader in terms that maybe they respect timelines. They're just very strict to timelines, and we never change, and we just keep everyone on track. And your team members or employees might be respectful of their work and life balance, okay, or their personal time. And sometimes we value, what comes first and what comes after. And we also respect, personal boundaries and all of that. So that's why it's not enough that we just say, yeah, we value respect, we value confidentiality, or we value safety. What does it look like when in team meetings with the suppliers, in working how many hours we work a week, and how we manage, in the case that I gave you, the company's asset, because it's really one conversation I've had also with leaders now when I was more mature in HR. It was about using social media during our, with the company cell phone or with a computer, etc. And most managers my age and above were a bit like, no, that's just not the way you do it, because we have to respect, the company time and the company, it's the company's computer or whatever. And we did a study, and it turns out they're used a little bit more, you use social media usually during your lunch breaks, at least in where I was in. Don't tell tomorrow everyone that you're allowed to do Instagram, but it's just really used in a healthy way, kind of just to manage through the day. It just really, when we monitored on the IT network, that how many times people logged in, or if they had Facebook on their screen, it just really didn't distract of productivity, and it was kind of needed. And sometimes we were asking people to work more than several times a day when we had a project or a deadline or so that's the deal you have to do with within your teams. It's like, no, we're going to ban everyone from using Facebook or Instagram. I don't recommend doing that. It's just talk about, get your data, who is doing what and how do it, and be smarter enough to work around the deliverables and what makes us successful with customers. And then, the way you treat employees will make them passionate for the customers, will make their success in their work, and will make successful the company. So that is what you have to, again, go to the details of what those values represent, not just in the formal document, but in the day-to-day, again. So do we take time out? So that's a conversation that's been having, for example, in Mexico, we don't have a formal home office policy in the global, in the country standards for work and for work regulations. So this is a time where companies are ahead of it, because we really were doing home office for some time now, right? And people work from their mobile, and sometimes the minimum requirements are just not fit for you. And so we had to bring on the leaders, and I'm glad to have, with most of my friends this day, or people that I know that work in different companies, they've kind of relaxed around that idea in terms of, well, productivity didn't go down in terms of having everyone at home office. Which doesn't say that everyone should be allowed there, but it's just how you communicate and how you keep bringing out these roles and responsibilities is just the key to go. Okay, so I spend more time in the dialogue because those go by day. okay, the mishaps, and do we stand for what we believe, and are we adhering to the code of conduct and the values or not? And that I mentioned, I will go more into details in the last piece, which is the support structure. There has to be someone in your team that it has an independent authority to really go when breaches such as the one that I mentioned, in confidential information, in health and safety, and really go, and then sometimes non-compliance with anything that we share are not is not coming through. So this is just a very quick also summary of what a code of conduct might look like for you. And it's basically the do's and don'ts of a company. It doesn't have to be lengthy. And like I mentioned, the company values are important, the country regulations and this is where you serve your customers, and also because sometimes there are international companies coming to work in our communities. So it's just really, it's important to say who is acting on behalf. Or we have a lot of third parties, like we manage a couple of brands sometimes. So that's also. And also be mindful of the industry and service regulations. So for telecommunications, for these days for example, in pharmaceuticals and transportation is a very heavily regulated company that needs to have constant updates and training. So you might have also to look at that in terms of what you want to do to adhere. And then it's the commercial side that, depending on where you are, again, it really comes into the price fixing, the customer information, and some other areas. ABB, the company that I mentioned, we had our share of going into again bad decisions being made not by individuals that really impacted the company for years to come. So there was a substation price fixing in the 90s that you can probably read about it in the newspaper. So there were a lot of investigations, etc. And we really had to work our way through. So what I mentioned, it's not that there's a breach, it's just how you manage. And that's what I mentioned, the interesting piece, it's going through how you manage with stakeholders, communities, being involved with the community is also very important these days. Asset information security, and this is the piece where I go, in reporting and investigations. There's usually, again, and it depends on how does it work in your industry, that sometimes there are reporting lines, like hotlines that people can just access, and it's also about bringing up their questions. So like I mentioned, for sales teams, it's just very common that they network with other sales teams, and it's kind of easy environment to just talk about sensitive matters. So what we did in the past is that we just have the reporting for questions and answers. It's not just to just really help people bring up their items instead of just calling them in, and do a formal investigation. So like in my case, if it had happened to me before, I know I would have handled it differently. I would just really not go to the person, but just really report it, and then somebody else manage it. So are you trying to signal me, or should we go?
Just testing my microphone, see if it's working. Go on.
Oh, okay, no, it's good. It's silent. You should have learned that in the science. And so I'm going to share to you, I was a bit curious and try to, I would say, guess what this, whoops. So there's this great company. I'm going to stop sharing and then just open up their website, which was really great to see that they posted on their webpage. So I wanted to make it a tease for you, but it will not be possible. So I was really glad to see, for example, a company based in Nigeria and they manage a lot of infrastructure. They're in many businesses. So again, so this is why you make it kind of generic of the values that you hold dear. But this is what it looks like to have a code of conduct and a value-based culture. Mm-hmm. So this is Tolerem Group. I hope some of you may be familiar with it. Mm-hmm. And most companies that today's are rewarded as good employers and the most admired companies usually have this kind of setup in their homepage. And like I mentioned, they have the stories of how they make them come to life. So it's not just being up declaring, but it's just like the activities that they take on into making them come alive. And I love this part where it says, for generations, our core values of trust, respect, commitment, courage, and humility are our compass. I love the word compass because it gives you kind of the, again, word to look for in an ever-changing global landscape. So if we could imagine everyone at Tolerem where they are based, like they could be at the field, they could be an administrative task, or they could be in support functions or delivering front face. If they can just really remember this and that every day, then we're good to go. They will behave in a way that agrees success, not just for them, for the company and everyone that visits. Mm-hmm. So this is also important. Values don't have to be like 10, because again, also in these days, because we don't have that retention anymore, because we can't remember phone numbers and those kind of things, because everything is on your mobile. Just keep it simple: trust, respect, commitment, courage, and humility, and that's it. Okay. So make it simple for you. Like I mentioned, it does have to be a formal document, but that doesn't have to be lengthy. Usually 20 pages is like way too long, because like we said, these days, it's not that you take the time, but it's worth the time. But it just really have to, again, work on the next thing. Okay. And this is one, just replicate it all over all over the company, again, keychains and the screenshots and everything that just really looks colorful. Once you do that and you engage people and just really becoming excited about what trust, commitment looks like, and then you'll be much better equipped into what happens when we're not adhering to those. So I need to stop sharing again because I not. Okay. Okay. So this is where we left off. Mm-hmm. So that's how it looks like. And again, it goes more into details, usually a PDF, where you can see how customers, employers, your suppliers, and the community you get involved. So this is the structure of code of conduct in a nutshell. Please remember the how you roll it out is just as important as having the code of conduct. Okay. And now it's time to second story, which again, I don't mean to bring it up, but it's just to signify that even when you roll it out and you have everyone, sometimes you get stories like this as well. So this was a time around 2 years back, and I was working now in where I live now in Cancun. And we have an audit from the work authorities in a country in Central America. And so they're working together with our accounting and payroll analysts. And they found that we hadn't complied with the latest updates in retention of taxes for a handful of employees. And so again, we were opening the records and we had audits, etc. But what happened is the person that was conducting the investigation suggested that they would manage it separately or discreetly, I would put it, and then that we would have to return on the next day. So this is again, like I mentioned, it just really happens more often than we'd like to think. And again, it might be that your company's has, you know, is shielded, you know, with the code of conduct and the values. And then sometimes, again, not because of the people, but it's just in the context that we work. Mexico is right now actually struggling a lot, or we have struggled in the political area to just really work around this sort of unprofessional behaviors. And so we've been close to that. And so again, this might happen to you, or you might have someone close to you know. And this is, again, the questions. Do you report it to your team? Do you quit right there and right then, which might not be a you know, an option these days? It's just we have to be mindful of those situations. It's not easy to say, yeah, I'm just not standing for this and that's it. Or do you, again, you try to hide, like I mentioned, you do it and you hope that nobody finds out, you know, because you think you believe that you're acting in the best interest, or you're afraid that if you report it, you will lose your job. So those are what I mentioned, that's why you build the muscle before, because once you get to this point, that's why you need to, if you're managing a team of people, it's always great to encourage them to come forward and to see that they will not get in trouble and not try to manage things by themselves. We talk to our sales teams over and over again, do not manage it by yourself. Just come to us, we will make it work. So at least in the companies that I work with, anyone reporting was not in a serious problem. But then there might be other team cultures that when you report, it's seen like a bad thing. So that's something that you need to work on. And what happened here is that we refused to pay. We obviously, she reported it, and again, it was very brave that our colleague reported it, because again, that sense that I mentioned in the beginning, the being uncomfortable about what it is, and these were different companies. I just mentioned one in technology. This was just tourism. So, but that sense of it's just not right, it's just really common. And so we worked with her, like, thank you for bringing this to us. No, and because we were headquartered in Cancun, and she was down there, we couldn't bring her all the support that we needed, which is also something that happens today. We have remote teams, right? I mean, you're not something happening there, and we had a time difference, to react, etc. And gladly, we didn't pay. It was just like, and this is what the company liked. We refused to make improper payments. So we refused these situations. And we actually opened up, again, our books to make the correction. And again, she wasn't held accountable because it was a reporting thing. It was, okay, we were not aware that we had this update, and we had to pay a fine, for example, for being out of compliance, but pay the fine to the government, not to the official. And again, this might not work for you. Again, it's just really easy when there's a lax authorities, or this is just more common than we'd like to think, like I mentioned. So, but we didn't pay, and we opened up, we paid the fine, and then we looked inside and say, well, what do we do to reinforce? Remember those acknowledgements? We really re-released all the acknowledgements of letter of conduct so that everybody would be aware what had happened. Because again, what we call in human resources the grapevine, which is, this happened in Central America, but by the next day, also people working in Cancun and the US also knew about the incident, because these things kind of get to know. So we were very glad with the director of the country. We worked directly with the leader. She's a lady from the Dominican Republic, but also living in Cancun and managing Central America. So she had all this, she got gone on and on with around working with Caribbean countries. And so she was very firm decision into how we would handle it. But we also had to report it to our CFO. And we did that, and we looked into all the records, and we also set up special audits in the records, and we just not only looked at that country, but we did a sample that everybody was being withheld their taxes. So again, it's because what also I want you to think about, it's the time that it takes when you find out a breach. It's just really time that we would rather be spending innovating and serving our customers and doing the right thing for them. So the time that we have to write up and report and speak with our colleague again, so make sure that she felt comfortable that the way that we managed and etc. It wasn't her fault that we would manage. So it's a lot of time it takes to kind of reassure, to get back on track. And so this was another more recent story that I want to share with you that that again happens with the best of intentions. Okay, and like I mentioned, it has to do, I want to highlight that it has to do a lot to getting to know your industry and who you're working with and your parties. Have an open communication with your leaders. Make sure that the leaders, the team leaders or the highest ranking officer are really aware of what's going on with the day-to-day colleagues that are in a way actually doing the work. So, and strive as much as you can that people come up with their questions before the incidents happen. Okay, this is just like before, it's like, do you have any questions? How you socialize is how you do it, managing day to day, getting to know and making people comfortable, making a space where people feel comfortable to come with questions for you. And so let me just, because I have it then, okay. Now this was something that I was just very also glad to find in what I was mentioning earlier. That ethics and morality is seems to be the same everywhere, and we have to thank this Dr. Oliver Curry, who's an anthropologist at the University of Oxford, and he did a study with 60 societies around the world. It was documental and also with working with local anthropologists, and he discovered that everyone shares a common moral code. And we all agree as human beings that cooperating, promoting the common good, and is the right thing to do. And I was just very surprised to hear about this. So I went on and Googled him. That's his web page. He has a TED Talk as well, working when he talks about kindness. But I want to focus right now on the study that he did, because he found that these 7 traits of again being a good again, just a good individual, doesn't matter if you're a team member or a family member. So what does it look like, and what does morality show us? Mm-hmm. So he looked very extensively, and he also, and his class on this study is also on the page of the Oxford School of Anthropology, and lots of papers, because the study is ongoing. And he found out that these 7 behaviors that you see here are really the common print to solve conflicts and to foster cooperation, and it was interesting that he didn't find, except for one person in around like 9,000 people, that these 7 behaviors are seen as anyone would qualify as bad behaviors. That's something they wouldn't do. So fostering cooperation means caring for your family and helping one's group. Mm-hmm. And exchanging favors, which is kind of also like setting up boundaries and asking for and favors not in the manner that I mentioned, but just really exchanging favors and to promote the well-being, like you do with your neighbor. Mm-hmm. So these are also just going into the day-to-day family systems. Mm-hmm. And helping your group, which, like I mentioned, might be your small group where you work, it might be your company, and how it expands. Mm-hmm. And it turns out also that we are really, and this is also probably why I became really involved in human resources around 15 years ago, because like I mentioned, I wasn't always in human resources. I started out in quality assurance, solving conflicts, solving problems and conflict is something that we like to do. Again, not for the sake of the conflict, but just like really putting things at ease. And it involves being brave, just like I mentioned in the cases that we had, deferring to superiors, which is like having a clear line of what does it look like. Not being overpowered, but just like really having that mentor and support figure that can help you around. Dividing resources. And like we mentioned, when we speak about resources, it's about what we mentioned. They have evolved in these days into our time, our loyalties, where we work. So those are the resources that we have, especially now these days, like the time, like I said, work and life balance. And yes, of course, the monetary implications that it has. So this is about dividing, and it's a sense of fairness that we perceive in how we divide the resources, that it's the one that really brings us about behaving in an immoral way. And respecting property, which is clearly what I started talking about this morning. So this is to say, that's why you find these commonalities in the ethics program and the code of conduct and the values in companies all over the world. We really strive to make this a better society. And if your values, this doesn't mean that you have to put them all in your document, because like I mentioned, it's just very customized to you, but it just really, we believe, and this is why we make agreements into what we will value as groups, as team members. And the interesting thing is what the other example that I was giving you, sometimes what we don't seem to agree much on, and this is what I really want you to get to know, this doctor, is that the priorities that we bring, like we value being brave over deferring to superiors, that's where the conflicts happen. Or we value first family, then one's group. So that's when it really begins to take shape. So it's just really important because, again, companies as a whole just really tend to value something, and the more we behave and we value, and we, like we say, we also recognize those that are working towards that, the better off we will be. And so this is all my time. I have to speak today. No, it's so what we went through. Yes. Oh, sorry. Let me. Well, so from today, we've covered. I've shared, some stories that have shaped me, and you probably have one of your own, and you don't ask for someone that you trust. Have you had this happen to you? And the most important conversation is within yourself. Like, what values are important to me right now? Like really, and to me to be successful, to me to come to a place of work, or the company that I'm setting up, that I will value, based on where I'm at right now, and where do I want to be in a couple of years. So that question of what values, like we mentioned, some respect and innovation, teams, humility, honesty, those kind of heavy words are the ones that I invite you to just really think about. And thinking of the question that you have, well, can you identify someone that has really, or a company, or someone in a company that has acted ethically? And there's really a world out there of companies that you've heard of, that maybe you haven't heard of, or that are really considered respected. And get curious. What is it that they do that just really gives them that credibility and respect and sort of like Colorama, which I hope that most people want to work towards them. And there are other, global companies that not necessarily have great mentor suites. Again, it's not about who makes the biggest, has the largest employee or is worldwide, but just really who does have great credibility. There's a lot of computer software companies these days that are just really striving, besides the ones that we had before, like Dell and IBM, etc. And very important, where will you get your role model and mentor for code of conduct and ethics? Where would you get further support if you don't find someone within your next circle? And work. So what do I want to do next? Do I want to ask, or maybe there's already a code of conduct in your company and you don't know about it. Well, take some time, and look into it and see into the stories of what it is that you have and what your company values. If you don't have a code of conduct, it's a great way to ask your team, hey guys, what are we valuing here? And ask your boss, like, well, I'm curious, in times of change that we said, we're really redefining a lot of internal rules for teams and how we work with other countries and how we're expanding or contracting or reshaping our work life. So it's like, what do we value in these times of change and how we're managing today's crisis? And if you have heard of a not so great stories such as the ones that I've heard, dig into them. What happened to the people, and look at the cost of ethics, because it doesn't, and that's why the study of Dr. Curry made a lot of sense to me, because it doesn't never pays to just really take the shortcut or the sideway or the silent about it. It really doesn't pay. So most companies that you will see that are most regarded are really the ones that have these standards. And well, I believe I'm open for questions now.
All right, thank you so much, Beatriz. That was a really great and an important presentation. I think you talked about a lot of important topics, and it's gonna bring it up. I think it's gonna bring up a lot of questions for our discussion. But before that, we're gonna go to a commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
The financial world is a bit like the insurance world, where it was set up to be complex, because then it's very hard for individuals to disrupt it. And I think what technology does is it enables us to simplify it.
Money does these three things that we really care about. It's a way of measuring the value of things. It's a way of doing transactions with each other. It's a way of storing value over time. All those three things are technological challenges that societies have grappled with since the dawn of time.
Today we are halfway in the digital revolution. We have digitized pictures, right? Then we have digitized books. Then we have digitized music with MP3s, movies with MP4. Next is digitizing money, digitizing reputation, digitizing identity, digitizing ourselves.
A lot of the way credit and the financial system is set up, it locks a lot of people out, and it really centralizes wealth and control and production, and that's had a real effect on economies and innovation and the way people live. I think what's most exciting in the entrepreneurial community is it's kind of a blowing up of power. You see this power moving from the center to the edges, and that's incredibly exciting because you can suddenly exchange in new ways. You can bring people into the financial system that have been previously excluded.
Okay, and we are back from the break. Audience, this is your chance to share your questions that come to mind. Please remember we have 30 minutes, so let's share your questions. I think we have one question here in the chat.
Yes, I read it from Ayanda.
Yes, yep. Do you want to read it out, Beatriz?
Oh, yeah, you read it.
Okay, sure.
It's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
With the new remote working, is the code of conduct still relevant since the workplace is no longer defined as the office? It's a great question.
Yeah, I think it's on everyone's mind. Yes, and that's the sort of customized definitions that you want to work with. I used workplace because that's again, I still haven't shed off my my Generation Z cap. But yes, I would urge you to define workplace as wherever you take part and are acting on behalf of the company that you work with. And so it might be so yes, remote working would also apply, but you just have to add it on, and this is very common for people, like I mentioned, in fields, in sales and service, because they're usually out there. So it doesn't have to be the administrative. So just really enlarge the definition and bring on the acknowledgement, which is very easy these days. Your mobile, you receive a form, you acknowledge the code of conduct, and it's stored. Make sense, Ayanda? We didn't have her on camera though. But like you mentioned.
We have Bamidele that has raised his hand.
Oh, yes. Idris, what's your question for us?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Good afternoon from Nigeria.
Good afternoon.
I actually wanted to ask, yes. Now, with respect to what has been happening in the United States regarding ethics, work ethics, I don't want to go into politics. However, I'm trying to just make a comparison of what is going on in the political terrain of the United States and its relationship with ethics. How would you relate that to this particular topic? Looking at it from the angle that, okay, the United States leadership also has to do with ethics. So how would you compare that to? Then my second question is, are we going to be getting this recording after this session?
Okay, I see Madeline nodding, so that means yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, so just be mindful of it. And I will send you one additional, so we're going to put in the Tolerama code of conduct. So the version is not finalized. So thank you, Bami. It is a situation I actually have thought a lot about during the pandemic. And actually since last year, when, again, not going into the politics, because I think that's not the question. And like we said, it's not our context right now, but it has a lot of repercussions globally that we speak about it. And this is what I would mention in the first. And when I think about US, which is about the examples that I gave, is not one person in a certain place working, doing or not doing. It's just about the surroundings, the context, and if there are structures to realign or to call it out. I would say hope in terms that there are more institutions besides the ones that I see in Mexico that are starting to have an impact and starting to kind of, I would say, turn the tide and call those out. And this is the importance of just not doing it on yourself. It's just go together. And in my case, I really speak, and this is on the personal level, and as an HR consultant, I speak a lot. What does that look like, and how can I do it differently if I choose to do it differently with my community? And what we mentioned, the companies that are coming under fire. Again, no, this was unprecedented, so doing a lot of things. Many companies are doing a lot of things. Some are working, some are not, and they are retouring. So, so that's what I normally would say. It's like, how is it affecting on your side and your day to day, and how will you go about it differently? Like I said, just calling it out in a safe way that this is not what I would go about it, and this is how we would say we fight the systems and reinforce the systems and continue to bring those issues up, is the way I go about it. I don't know if I answered the question, Bam, but thank you for the vulnerability.
Yes, I get. I understand what you're saying. Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
All right. Do we have any more questions? Let's see.
Yeah, well, if I may jump in here.
Hello, Dieter.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for the presentation, Bea. I have a special issue. Nowadays there are lots of focuses on gender-based issues or mobbing, and I don't know, that's changed a lot in the ethics of a company. They write it down in their internal rules, but it's handled either lousy or not really according to the internal rules. How do you see that? How is our society changing in these ethics based on this new wave of gender-based and issues or mobbing issues?
Mm-hmm. And where are you based, Dieter? Just to give me a little bit more context.
Sorry, I didn't get it.
Where are you based?
I'm in Switzerland.
Oh, okay. I see. Well, every base is a Swiss company, so I kind of figured. Yes, I think we have a whole spectrum of what I was mentioning. One thing is to mention that this is what we strive in, and another to push the needle. And what, in a similar sense that I was speaking, where did you go? Okay. Yes, to Babidel. It's one, we have to secure the safety, and this is where the ethics hotlines are really helpful, because they help contain and open up investigations for what you just described, mobbing or being called out and discrimination. And this is one way where I think, the most respected companies really go above and beyond of what's regulated in the country, if they are brave enough to embrace it. And I used the example push the needle because, yes, my personal take here is that we are not pushing the needle fast enough. We are kind of expecting that things will fall into place, someday. We are working towards it. Like, it's a great example that you're like, oh, it's already in our webpage and the day-to-day is different. So you have to double your efforts to just really not allow any behavior to stand in a sense. And this is my 3 ways to manage kind of, I would say, bullying in the workplace. And this I didn't take from human resources. It was another class that I took on violence prevention. Is that, and again, so if you know anyone that might have gone through this is what I advise you to tell them, if you're not putting yourself in danger, at risk. It's just, first step is you call out the behavior and you say, well, this is not, this will not stand in my personal agenda. Okay, you call out the behavior. It might happen to things. The person misbehaving might just stop there, or they might, for unknown reasons that we're not going to talk about here, they might just escalate, the aggression. And So the second step is, you mentioned again, this is not a, you know, I will not stand for this, and I will report you the next time you do this. And I would encourage you that at those times, that is when you pick up the phone to your immediate superior, someone that you trust. And this is the importance of networking and support and circles of empowerment. And in that moment, you report it. You say, well, I just feel unsafe. This happened to me and I'm uncomfortable. Because sometimes, again, because of a work relation, you cannot just move away. No, it's like you keep working with someone. We had a situation with the supplier, for example, and also with, that was just making uncomfortable one of our employees. And so the employee just really had to be removed from the project. And who needs that? You know, it's just, again, it's unproductivity. It's just not. But if it should happen the third time, then you just really need to put yourself in a safe place. So this is what I mentioned, that the coding of conduct is not important. We have to go specific into the escalation, who gets what to call when, just like a safety, like I mentioned, like in safety, like, you know, natural disasters, those kinds of things, just really has to be pinpoint. And leadership needs to be made aware. And that's why reporting is important. Because I also, you know, a good name for leadership teams, you know, global leaders, and the reason we sometimes see not being taking enough action is because they don't have the data. This is why I love the report from the anthropology, being in human resources, because you cannot find data. And we have, you know, some number, one incident would be bad, bullying or harassing in a company. We have, if they're accumulating, such as, you know, cases we're having, then we know we're not living up to our standards. Then we know sadly, it's lip service. And that cannot stand. I really believe that most companies that just really work hard on their reputation, not just monetary, but reputation with their communities, will do the right thing. But we really need to double up the efforts. That's what I would do, teacher. Okay. So first, put a small scale ABC, and then urge leadership to get the data right and act quickly.
Yeah.
Make sense?
So if I see, it's a real challenge to act appropriately in such kind of issues, and it needs lots of experience to detect, to see, to feel what's going on, and to act then, because we cannot spoil the team. On the other side, we have to protect the weakest part or where it happens. So I understand. Thank you.
Yes. And we don't feel good about reporting. It's like we feel that, oh, what will happen to me? We still have, at least in the Latin American countries, that we will get into trouble if we call it out. And we have to change that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dieter. We are open for more questions. Anyone?
Yes, please. I have a question here for Beatriz.
Yes.
Yeah, hi, Beatriz. Thanks for the class and thanks for impacting us. I have a question as regards to the remote, the way the world is tilting right now. We are tilting towards remote working, you understand? Working from home and the likes. And the ethics part. And in the course of working from home, you are going to work with different departments and different co-work colleagues, with which, and you still have to keep the ethics in place, in check, and making sure you follow through as it is. So how do you balance that, with which you're not going to fall short, or you're not going to go against the ethics or the code of conduct in code? Do you get what I'm saying?
No, you give more specifics on what you experience. So you're
we're talking about ethics now and code of conduct.
Yes.
You understand? That's a guardian of how we work. What guides us is set down rules that guides you in your place of work. So now that we're talking about remote working, like you work from home, working as in from your comfort zones, like, so you'll be communicating, or you'll be working with different departments, or you'll be working with different persons, different colleagues. So how do you balance it with which you still stay true to the code of conduct, your ethics, at work is still top notch, is still professional in its sense, and in the cost of maybe should anything happen, as in the cost of working with a partner or with a department or with a colleague, how do you keep those things in check? What are the ways you balance those things?
I would say in a similar way that we've done that I mentioned. In terms, and actually I think it has become more important now they're working remotely, and we're kind of taking many things for granted. So it takes a different, but you say, it's just, I'm not exactly sure it's our question in regards to managing many people or how we behave in again, like in remote settings, but speaking individually and one-to-one is always works best when something is not working. And this goes into not just ethics, but the progress that we are making. So it's one small item that Yuri did that I liked around this here is turning our cameras on. It's because again, how do you show respect, or how do we know that something is working until we really speak to the people? And I think the remote, like I mentioned, remote work is needed and necessary, and I think it will go away. But the personal engagement of what we need to do, it really has to be reinforced. And we just kind of go, oh, everything will be managed remotely. And so I think you're, and again, keeping what we mentioned, keeping yourself safe is the most important conversation that you can have. So if something is not working with you because you're feeling, again, the remote and we're not getting the impact that we would like, ask for support. It might be support of your colleague, it might be support of someone ahead of you, or just get the safety that you need to work as best as you can. It doesn't have to be defined in the code of conduct. Maybe you need to address it, like we said in the case before. Does that make sense? So if you're feeling, that we changed something and we feel overwhelmed, I think overwhelm is a word that has gone around in the last few moments, because we're still trying to solve the problems, like we said, but we don't have the people, we don't have the time or the resources, or we come into a class and we have distractions. So it has really been a challenge. So I would encourage you to speak to one person in that area, to just what is not working for you, and work around it, and get if it's something about overwork as well, ask for help.
Okay, as a boss, let me say, as a boss, managing persons in different areas, in different remote areas. Okay, and there's no there will always be a place for conflict, maybe disagreement between different workers or different colleagues or different departments. So I'm talking about, how do you balance those things now? Because you are not working in the same office, you are working in different areas or different time zones, different places, with which you can only communicate via mobile phones or via Zoom or wherever, or maybe through the work space you have online or whatever. So how do you balance those things, with which should there be any conflicts, or maybe, for example, something happened without your knowledge? How do you put those things in context? How do you balance them, with which you make sure everything, the work standards still go on, the ethics still remains, and you resolve the conflict and what have you? That's what I'm asking.
Well, I'm curious about why you mentioned something that you don't know, because and again, thank you for the candor, because it seems that you've, in the examples that I mentioned, it's the shock that we're not solving, is what brings us an additional anxiety. So however large your team might be, my suggestion is to go at least speak to them individually. Because usually the conflict that arise in the meetings or in the day-to-day, we're not fighting about the issue. It's about what we say, the stories that we have. And like you mentioned, we are being very edgy with each other these days because we're managing too much too soon. And like I mentioned, and via remote. Okay, so just to paraphrase, conflict solving, there also has to be a process in place. Who and what, and keep in mind that everyone, even with or without a code of conduct, they're just striving to succeed by whatever adjustments they need to be doing. And just like I mentioned in the conflicts, one way to stop conversations is when you start arguing about how you are arguing instead of the topics. That's when you need to put a break. It doesn't serve anyone to just really be on conflict on a Zoom meeting, etc. Now we're striving away from the code of conduct. Okay? So dialogue works best. I know as a leaders, we're usually, pressured a bit, to delivering with the one ahead of us and then with our teams. So make a stop and prioritize and ask for help. I know it's not the straightforward answer because we're struggling a lot, and you're probably defining what many team leaders, anyone in leadership and managing a group has really gone through a lot now remotely. And now we're having that message which speaks to, we're really testing how the values that we have are really coming alive. Because if we say we value work-life balance and we have people or our teams in burnout mode, then we're not. But companies are trying to survive right now. We're really taken back into survival and not thriving, which is, again, our common way. So, so I don't know if I'm helping actually, but I think you bring out a very important topic into be kind to ourselves that we are adjusting to a lot in a short time. And the way to work with overwhelm is not more overwhelm. It's just really stop and take a break and make sure that everybody feels safe. But I would say I would have a really deep conversation with whoever your superior is and talk about this and not speak about what is the topic of work, but how we are behaving and how everyone is feeling. And read about in my Facebook page that I'll post a little bit about this items on emotional mental health and emotional items during the pandemic for remote teams. Thank you for reaching out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a raising hand again.
Compami.
Hi, Bami.
Okay. My apologies for pulling you back again. I hope my questions are not too much. No. Okay. I see that Beatriz has made this topic so calm, collected, and sometimes as she was actually explaining, you would actually think that, okay, you made it so calm. And sometimes I'm trying to juxtapose it with what is actually ongoing in the industry. I've had several examples, whereby there is just like the Pareto analysis. Some people feel that code of conduct is actually meant for some cadre of people. Ethics and code of conduct is actually meant for some cadre of people. For instance, look at the issue of the Nissan case in Japan, the chairman of the Nissan case in Japan. You have several examples there also in Africa, in Nigeria, in Europe, in every part of the world. You have several examples. Now, if a particular cadre, I don't want to start specifying now, if a particular cadre staff actually go against work ethics, the law or there's a disciplinary action that easily gets across to them. However, there are some sects also, or some cadre, that if they flout these rules or they go against this ethics or code of conduct, it's not as vicious as some particular cadre. So it's always like that in several organizations. So what will you now say to people that have lost that confidence in code of conduct and ethics of several organizations looking at this aspect?
Well, Bami, no, and you're not bombarding, but it's and this comes about building trust. And do you remember when the second slide that I showed you, why it's as important as the code of conduct are the values. And it's not in small print, but it's what helps teams build trust. And to me, below is, before you gain trust, you need to gain credibility. And like you mentioned, I'm not familiar with the Nissan case, but, and by the way, do you work in automotive industry?
No, I work in an FMCG.
Which is, can you?
Fast-moving consumer goods.
Oh, okay, kind of retail, yes.
The Nissan case I was making reference to, the chairman of Nissan in Japan that actually fled Japan to Lebanon. It was all over the news.
Yes. And we also have one leader of Huawei.
So you could actually make reference to it.
Yes. Well,
yes.
I would.
Yes. So
ask you. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I would.
I was saying if.
Yes, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead. Finish up.
And that's what I was. I'm glad that you read the news, because you will see both, and it's interesting to me because it's what I mentioned before. It's like, yes, we get really the headlines of when it's not working, and we get less headlines of when it has worked, right? And I would challenge you in that area. And but I was speaking about credibility. So team's credibility, individual credibility, and company's credibility come before confidence and trust, okay, and reputation. And the phrase that comes to mind is like, it takes years to build credibility and trust. I would say like decades. And just 1 second or one headline to blow it up the window. And those behaviors that we see that people fleeing, again, in the context that I've been, I worked in the cases that I shared. It's, you really believe in the company, as a whole. And then on the individuals, you work with them, but you try to separate what it is. So what I mean is like one person just leaving the country in guilt, or accepting their guilt, but just really calling prosecutors, and they're really all over the news. I mean, not just for Nissan, etc. Sadly, and if you. Like I mentioned, it depends on how the case is handled in the company that goes beyond the individual. Mm-hmm. And again, it can probably be on the how long it took ABB to just really tackle our issues. We did that. I heard it, but again, it wasn't within my authority. That we didn't have people leave countries, but actually they were really dismissed from the company prior to. But what I mentioned is the restoration that takes precedent. So, and headlines today can also be misleading, which brings me to another thing. Like when you see those scandalous newspapers, just really double check your news, because we're also in the item of etc. And look beyond the story that the newscaster is telling, and look what the company is doing to make sure that doesn't happen again. I know it's not enough, because like we said, well, we built, you know, content for years, and now we have just one, and it's just one person represent, you know, tens of thousands or 1,100,000. And getting back to your personal actions, ask yourselves, have I been in those situations? If I were, and I think it's also common that we have, well, if they did it, you know, in that other company, you know, then, well, you know, what are we left with? And like I mentioned before, this really is a time that we need everyone doing their best. And the impact, the positive impact that we have in our day-to-day, just larger than what one company is doing in Japan, which will be hard, and I'm sure they will take a lot to recover, etc. But just really take that other step into, okay, so what do I do so we don't become the next Nissan? Okay, so what do we do, because we don't want anyone's name in this company to just really have to go away. What don't we know? You know, how do we reinforce each other? How do we open up? And it doesn't, and that's what it said, it's a daily practice. It's not just when, you know, human resources or when legal comes announcing the code of conduct. It's just every day, like we were mentioning with our previous caller. It's just one breach of respect of, you know, those escalate, and those are the ones that you need to take care of. But thank you. You really give me a lot to enlarge the conversation. Okay, so. Okay.
Thank you so much. I appreciate.
No,
I appreciate it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Bonnie. All right, do we have time for more questions? Yes, we do. Yes. Let's open up for more questions. I think we have a question about from Liesel on the chat box. I'm going to read it to you, Beatriz.
Okay.
What can you advise to a company or project owners or leaders who have this code of conduct, but they not successful to continue practicing in the team? Because sometimes it is the reason why team members discouraged to work.
Okay. Is it similar to others? Can you just reread it again? Because you're not coming through with my. Okay.
What can you advise to a company or project owners or leaders who have this code of conduct, but they're not successful to continue practicing in the team? Because sometimes it is the reason why team members discouraged to work.
Okay. From my toolbox, I would say be mindful of the reporting and then the morale. You have to measure them both. Like now we're speaking of employee engagement. So for example, in this tourism company that I was working with, we have like 85% of employee engagement and satisfaction with the company, which we didn't consider, and it was good enough, but we said, can we do better? Because it usually means that you have people that are just kind of just neutral there. You know, they're not promoting or actively engagement. And you might have those people that, you know, just not engaged, like you mentioned, they just bring the morale. Now, morale can come from different places. One, because it's, obviously, we're not adhering to the behaviors that we said, but also kind of the changes and the happenings that we have in our day-to-day job. So, and this, So I will divide it in two. Like, be sure you have one way to measure consistently, which means you have to measure it the same time each time, which is challenging because companies now are changing structure. So to me, it means you have to measure it more frequently than you used to. One time a year is not enough. So measure pulses of employees frequently, and measure their compliance of the code of conduct as well, and the cases, and then look at them together. Because it seems to me that, again, not all teams' morales or teams' disengagement might come from we're not living our values. It might come from what we were mentioning, it's just overwhelm right now. It's just lack of communication and priorities, and we're adjusting, and everybody's just really nervous right now. So, and they're really nice kind of gaming and engagement applications these days to keep people engaged and opening conversations, and have leadership team members like present, and doing that more than ever. I know it's asking a lot they've done through remote working and managing, etc. But we really need to put everyone to pull their weight and make sure that people are feeling safe. One way to notice if one of your team members might need some help is that they just kind of disengage of what their normal behavior used to be. They were just so those things that you begin to notice, measure them and open up them. So what I'm saying is to work a lot with the leadership team so they know that they're not, that if it's a project, that we speak about why we became disengaged with the project to begin with. And with the code of conduct and values, just really make sure that you're really living up to them. And you believe like, yeah, we're managing well the code of conduct, because that's not happening to us and we're just doing it great. Look also at what we call, it might be different in your cases, but like the exit interviews. There's a lot that colleagues that leave a company voluntarily tell in the end. And those are the minor misbehaves that you can learn from. So what I mean is that you have to be more agile and having confident data to just really address the issue. Make sure leaders are aware what the role is, and address them daily, like speak to them openly, and work around your metrics more day to day. No, I would say that not everything is a code of conduct, but it needs to be addressed right there, and don't wait until we release it or we have a success story. Make people safe to open up. There are also programs that are called ombudsmen, which are really successful as well, which are kind of also independent. But again, I don't want to bring them to that it has to be it's a lot of infrastructure, and sometimes we need to think agile and swift structures these days. But then make sure that there's someone independent taking a look into that.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for that question.
Yeah.
We also have another question in the chat box by Shabu. He said, listening to your presentation, it's obvious that no organization will actually experience growth without good leadership ethics. Now, my question is, what are the key elements of ethical leadership and how they can be improved in an organization?
Well, now I need to write a book. I do have, and this is just like kind of my personal, when I started at the Growth Partner a couple of months ago, it was during the pandemic actually. And in the sense that this question that I told you, like, what do I value? And just shaping those experiences. And again, my wholehearted respect for people, for those of you who have kind of been in uncomfortable situations, just testifying them, just witnessing them and not knowing what to do, or you were at either side of the table and you burst out. So it takes the bravery that we mentioned, to be brave and bring about and speak about. It's just very powerful. Now, to me, the components, very personal. The components of ethics and leadership are transparency, which means it's not like honesty all the time, but just transparency about how you make your decisions. And transparency about, we know we're not working, we know we're not living up the code of conduct, like, and just really own that. Just be with that dissatisfaction, because it will make you better. But it's just transparency about what's going on, what makes us successful and what has deferred us. And passion, which is the reason why the previous question was so important. If we are not passionate about what we're doing, there's something there, you know. And passion means being meaningful. Okay, it doesn't have to be about just being, you know, like jumping all the time. It's just about being like caring. You're passionate about, if you care about what you're doing, you know, you'll take care of the customer. You'll do it, you know, in a way. You'll take that extra effort for your team members. You have to be passionate, which is one of my personal brands. Like, it's not just going to do it, then let's forget about it. And that's why I also put integrity in one of my brands, because it's that congruency, that we're ready to own up our mistakes, and we're ready to be passionate. And the other is about respect. And it means about respect for boundaries and respect for differences, and respect for, we might not agree on, that I don't have to have the last word of this, regardless. You know, when the code of conduct is not there, but we're face to face, it's just respect and credibility between us. Again, just building that collaboration and cohesive network, that we have our backs and we don't. And it's a challenge right now because we're working remotely, as we mentioned. We don't know if we got our backs because we're not seeing each other as often as we used to. So do we have our back, or, you know, and that was just such a powerful comment in terms of what's happening. So you have to find other ways to connect outside of work, to make it, again, to have this respect and building success together. That's what it means about. And in ethical is like, again, when you have that accountability for a company, for a function, doing more than what the standards are. You know, it's like I mentioned, like we have to take care, not because, you know, the labor authority in your country tells you have to treat people with respect, you have to have diversity. It's like, how does it really, how do you ensure that everybody gets that message? That you do above and beyond the minimum quality standards or the minimum standards. If you have that, and you don't have to do it today, but you have to work toward that. That is just not the minimal that we can have, because I think the minimal is what we have in a few of the companies that we mentioned, or situations. You have to just really tip up the balance the other side. And that just really takes a lot of personal courage. So transparency, passion, courage, and respect would be the ones that, and going above and beyond, would be my 5 personal Beatriz Lopez keys to ethical leadership.
All right, thank you.
And
so much.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Thank you. No, and again, great questions, and be mindful of this and work them through. The questions that I have are just for reflection. It's not today you will answer. It's Saturday, so don't try to answer them all today, but take your time and space for that.
Yes, that's great. We still have time for a couple more questions, I think.
Yeah.
Anyone?
I think this was the last one.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you, Madeline.
Okay, so I want to thank Beatriz for our masterclass today. Unfortunately, we don't have time for more questions, but feel free to connect with Beatriz on LinkedIn and follow her on other social media pages. She would be happy to answer any more questions and provide some advice, I'm sure.
Yes.
And now it's time for a commercial break before we wrap up. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
My name is Rita. And that beside me is my husband. Sorry, my ex. He deserved what he got. Trust me, he does deserve what he got. I guess you're wondering why a wife will have to do such a thing and be proud of it. But before you judge me,
I'm rolling on your wheel now. I'm drinking Hennessy now. I hope you see. See my eye, I don't cross. You put me for ambulance. See why you make me big. Why you make me big.
All right, welcome back. And we have reached the end of this masterclass session. I want to thank again Beatriz for those top classic insights and for just being here today and talking to us. Thank you so much, Beatriz.
Oh, thank you, Uriel. Thank you, everyone on the panel, Africunia, and the Masterclass Initiative. It's just been a wonderful, well, like I said, morning down here. And visit my webpage, thegrowthpartner.com.mx, or LinkedIn. Just follow me and for upcoming courses on resiliency, one-on-one coaching, and just HR questions. Very happy to help.
Well, it's our pleasure. And I want to also thank you, the audience, for our enthusiastic participation and for joining us today. We welcome any suggestions from your side topics you feel are relevant to yourselves. And we also look forward to joining us again for the future masterclasses as we continue our mission of fostering our community of enlightened individuals. And please remember to follow us or connect with us on social media and be on the lookout for the latest movie by Africunia TV. And do not miss our next weekend's masterclass. We have Hanini joining us, so please be on the lookout for that, for those details, and follow us on our social media pages to be on top of that. And we close off with some great entertainment, some music, and until next time, be well, be safe, and God bless. Goodbye.
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you.
Stop to bring us into her. Stop selling a mina one country. Stop supporting the bad politic. Stop telling us your story about democracy. Because all we want is our freedom. Yeah. Africa wants to deal with responsibility. We want our our freedom. We want our freedom, yeah. We want our freedom, Africa. We want to live independently, to create ourselves independently. If that's not possible, we will populate your continent. If it is the contrary, we will continue to come here. Spend the day in the desert on the ship, and you will continue to treat us like no paper. That's why I'm saying we want our freedom here. Stop to refuse us, to reject us, to deport us. We want our freedom. We want our freedom. We want our freedom, Africa. We want our freedom.
Africa, Africa, tosale lande kimya, totika kobunda, totika koswana, otozali banso bana tata moko, toyokana, tosalisana, tolingana, oh Africa.
Combien de mots reparlent pas les mêmes phrases? Combien de temps l'Afrique sera toujours enfermée là? Pendant que les autres sont toujours en train d'avancer, nous sommes toujours en train de reculer. On veut liberté. We want our freedom. We want our freedom. Yeah. We want our freedom, Africa. We want our freedom. Yeah, yeah. Ce morceau est dédicacé à l'un des grands combattants africains, son honorable, le cher Thomas Sankara, qui s'est battu pour l'Afrique, pour sa liberté. La patrie, on vaincra.
So thank you all participants for participating to today's masterclass session. On behalf of Africunia TV, we say goodbye and have a nice weekend. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Yuri.